That spark of innovation, it's just waiting for the perfect combination of tools and talent to bring it to life. Welcome to Pitch, Build, Scale. I'm your host, Chris Fanchi, a recovering startup founder, veteran SaaS marketer, turned dev tech enthusiast and growth specialist. Each episode, we connect with the builders, the visionaries, and the problem solvers who are redefining what's possible with today's technology and pioneering the websites, apps, and software products of tomorrow. These are the conversations that transform how we build, how we sell, and how we scale technology businesses in a world where the tech evolves by the minute. Ready to stay ahead of the curve? This is Pitch, Build, Scale. Hello and welcome to today's episode. We have a very exciting guest. For those of you just joining the podcast, we are Big North Marketing and specialize in helping dev shops and SaaS companies scale their revenue. So if you want to learn how to take your SaaS or dev business to the next level, make sure to stick around. And if you're interested in a free growth consultation, just drop the word growth in the DMs. We really are excited to have today's guest, Jim Welch, founder and head of studio at the Devhouse Agency. Jim is a creator, engineer, and game development leader who's worked with some of the biggest names in entertainment and enterprise, from Disney and Netflix to ExxonMobil. He's led Unity and Unreal teams on everything from AR/VR training tools to original video games, and now heads up Devhouse Agency, a multi-million-dollar software studio specializing in gaming and immersive tech. So, Jim, welcome to Pitch, Build, Scale.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Appreciate you coming. So, let's get started with your background. You've had a fascinating career. You've been a composer, sound designer, game developer, studio founder. What first pulled you into the world of interactive media?
Question. Yeah, it feels like it makes sense in the moment, but when you look back, you're like, that is kind of a weird, windy road. Yeah, I mean, I think I always was a creative person growing up. I like creating, and I kind of found the avenue I went with initially was with music and just kind of playing in bands. And as a kid, playing, you're exposed to different classes and choir and guitar class and all these things that were music related were just fun. And so that helped guide my early career. And really from there, just working really hard to find a foothold in the industry as a composer and sound designer. And then once I was there, then that's where I was able to start opening up my, I guess, creative horizons and think about what could be next. And really trying things, I guess, on the side. So I was composing professionally for a company called Funimation Entertainment. They're a big anime company. They've been acquired by Crunchyroll and absorbed into that organization now. But on the side, I was always doing game audio. Game audio is what pulled me in, and then that eventually led to the longer story, but the development side, right? Once I started to get into music for games, then it kind of creeps its way into the engineering and I give you a long, boring answer, but that's the there's a whole path I went down that road, and where I started to learn to code and to work as an engineer.
So were you an avid gamer yourself when you were younger, or did that just become an avenue for the music side of things?
I was, and actually, it's like an apt question because I think that was what led me away from film audio into game audio because I was really just like a casual film goer, and I enjoy Hollywood blockbuster popcorn movies. I wasn't too critical of film, and so when I went to school to be a composer, most people go into film, and I tried that, and it was okay. But when I came to games, I had like a strong opinion and critical eye for how they're made because I really enjoyed them deeply as a consumer. So yeah, definitely loved games growing up.
So what was your first experience going from just doing the sound to doing more on a game project?
It started as more of like a production role. So like I was doing sound, and then I was like, well, I'm doing the sound for these clients and people who want to pay me or either pay me, or early in my career just allowed me to work with them. And at some point I said, well, what if we did this kind of game? This would be kind of cool. And I think most people who like games always have some game idea. And so I was like, well, I know a lot of people now because I've been doing game audio. So I know a lot of people in the industry. So what if I could get some of my friends together and we could make something? And so initially it was like as a producer, like, hey, I'm going to pull these people together. I'm going to guide the vision of the project. But then engineers tend to be high in demand. They're busy, they're expensive, and so I can only borrow some of my friends' time for so long. And so then I started to dabble. And I was like, well, maybe I can fix that bug, or maybe I can add that feature. And then just a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of trial and error, a lot of Googling to figure it out. And that was kind of my entry point.
Very cool. Very cool. What was the first game concept you worked on?
Yeah, the first one that I can remember it was that project I was just describing. It was called Snake Escape, and it was like a spin-off of the old Snake game on the Nokia phones. So the screen was split in half. In the top half of the screen, you basically play a fancy looking version of Nokia Snake, and then the bottom of the screen, it was the inside of the snake's stomach. And so as you'd eat things, there was a mini game in the bottom that you'd have to like interact with those things that you consumed. And so you're like playing kind of two. It's like rubbing your belly, patting your head kind of thing. You have to do two things at once. And it was pretty cool. It was a fun game. It got released on iOS and Android. And then eventually I stopped supporting it. I think they pulled it down because you have to like update those things every so often.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was a really fun, kind of innovative game. So it was a great start.
So then how did you then transition into basically being an entrepreneur and starting your own business to do that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that taste of like creating something it was like I dipped my foot into this like massive ocean. It wasn't like, oh, I dipped my toe into like a pool and I could see what it could be. It's like, oh, I can just like make whatever I want now. Like music is great and like it has a lot of depth to it, but it's also like has its kind of limits of what you can really create with music alone. But when you can write code, it's like there's just so many things you can build. I think that just like sucked me in really, really hard. And so I started to go to a lot of like hackathons, startup weekends, game jams, and just like making things quickly. And I think that was what kind of got started. My dad also, he was an entrepreneur. I don't know if entrepreneur is the right word for my father. He was a business person. He ran a welding shop, and so it's his business. But it's not when we say entrepreneur today, you think of raising money and this whole different type of thing. But seeing, that you could run a business and you didn't have to necessarily be an employee, and growing up with that around me, I think made it comfortable for me to approach that world. And then using the excitement for the code. I think it was more excitement and naivety of like I can do anything, and that excited me to like try it and like build something. And so yeah, I did a little. I started a startup. We went through an accelerator, and so got a little bit of funding, and that was my first startup, and it was a game-based type experience, and that was kind of where it kicked things off.
So did that startup evolve into Devhouse Agency, or is that something that you spun off later on?
It totally separate. That one, I started with a co-founder, and we were creating like it's like video chat with games. This was like before Snapchat and all these things that like kind of gamified videos. Ultimately, just like it was a really ambitious big project that we just probably weren't equipped to build. So we got to we got the initial accelerator raise, the seed funding, and then when we went to do our Series A, there wasn't an immediate win, and then just the challenges with Devhouse. I'm a solo founder. The challenges of having a co-founder and the complexities of trying to keep that alive and keep both people happy is always a challenge. And so yeah, like that had its purpose. It served its purpose. I grew a lot through the experience. I got to become a much better engineer through it because I was running the business, but I was also the one writing the code, and we had one other engineer. So yeah, then from there, actually, then I shifted back to like working at studios and as an engineer, as an employee, using those skills I now had, and that's where I eventually ended up at ExxonMobil and some of those other ones.
Yeah, that's definitely not an uncommon path I've heard. You try the startup thing when you're maybe a little bit younger and maybe a little more naive, right? And even if it's has some success, a lot of times you'll end up finding your way back into industry, doing the same kind of things, but that itch never goes away, right?
Right. Yeah,
So
and so I did it for a number of years. Went back, like you said, worked for companies like Group Jones, Sector 5, ExxonMobil. But to your point, it's like that urge to kind of build something of my own and was always there, and then that's where DevHouse came out of. After leaving Exxon and starting DevHouse, it was initially just me, but then I grew it. I went a different route. I didn't do the raise, or I didn't go like try to get people convinced to this cool product I was building. It was like, hey, I will help. Almost like a freelancing role, like, hey, I'll come be an engineer for you if you need me. And then I just kind of hired more people as I got busier and more people requested my services, and then that grew organically into DevHouse.
so DevHouse originally started building projects for clients, right? But now you're building some projects for yourself as well. Can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about how that came to be?
Yeah, I mean, and that's like I think always as a person who's like going to school as a musician. Like the creativity is a really, core to what I do. And so I think building my own thing has always been something that's kind of what I would love to do if there was no restrictions or requirements of life other than just have fun. So it's always been something I wanted to do. And so even day one of Devhouse, but so I kind of see Devhouse is a vehicle that lets me do a few things at the same time. It lets me get better at what I do because I get to work every day in the field and the craft for clients. It lets me like use my skills for good. It helps other people with their projects. And then small amounts of it can kind of fund these internal projects. And that's where we've been able to build our own ideas. Like most game studios, like a lot of the ideas don't go that far. You try something for a while and you cancel it. Film does the same thing, but games especially so. And so we've had a lot of ideas that we've tried, and then we've ultimately pulled. So that our most recent project is one that we've gotten decently far on, and we're pretty excited about. But it's a balance. You can go raise a bunch of money and have that fund your project, or you can do it the way we're doing, whereas like we have a business, and that business funnels some of its revenue into the original IP.
That makes sense. So you worked in some pretty big organizations, and you've worked with some pretty big organizations. How do you go about presenting creative solutions or even gamified solutions to a company where that's not what they do? That's not really native to them, like in ExxonMobil.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times it's presenting visual examples. It's hard to explain either verbally or through words of like, hey, here is imagine if, especially when you don't have a lot of reference material for them. Like you can't say, hey, this one game, and they probably hadn't played that game. So you end up doing a lot of animated samples and concepts so where you can see things in motion. Stills are a little easier, but sometimes you actually have to like make things move so they can really see what the vision is. So it's a lot of, as boring as it sounds, like making decks and presenting concepts in a organized fashion, but also like making sure those are really beautiful. So it builds excitement. Most of the ideas, if they're in your head and you want someone to buy in on it, you have to get them excited as well. And most of the time, though, if people are coming to you, so like when I was at Exxon working with them, I mean, it was an internal org, right? So like Exxon's a massive business. And so we would serve Exxon, other segments of Exxon. So like someone would come to us who's like, hey, we need scaffolding safety training. And this is what we do today. And it kind of sucks. Can you guys do something in VR that works better, that's safer, all the different check marks they have? So oftentimes, even if they're not necessarily a creative person, they want a solution, like they're hungry for something. So it's not like an uphill battle a lot of the times. It's just a matter of showing them kind of what you're thinking so they can get on board.
Okay. So a lot of your gaming experience is built around creating games that are immersive. How would you define that? And what's the North Star when you're chasing when trying to build something?
Yeah, I like the term immersive. I think it's nice and a nice umbrella term. And really, the way I think of immersive when talking about tech, immersive tech, is things that really pull the 3D world, you into the 3D world. I guess that's a better way to put it. So if you think of like a traditional, video game or our app, these things are on a flat screen. You are not, as a human, really integrated into those. You might be controlling an avatar that looks like a human, but you're not in their persona. The closest you get in that is like a first person game where you see your arms and stuff, but even still, it's a fully fantasized world and you don't have much connection into it. When we're talking about immersive tech, it's like, hey, how do you with your physical body enter this? So VR is a great one, even though the visuals are purely virtual in VR, you are physically moving your physical body through a space. With AR, that is going to be, you're often holding a phone, sometimes glasses up, and you are again physically moving through a space. Things are moving around you in 3D, and then there's terms like MR, so it's like kind of where you're more like the HoloLens. No longer, HoloLens has been discontinued, but those kind of experiences like the Magic Leap and the HoloLens where it integrates it a little bit more. And now with like Vision Pro and MetaQuest, those are having better pass-through cameras, so they're doing a little bit more mixed reality where you're having your real world interact with the object. So a thing can go hide behind your real couch, even though it's virtual, and they know about each other, that sort of thing. And then I guess another area that often gets forgotten is like location-based. So like location-based VR, LBVR is often seen And that's where you physically go somewhere and it's more like an installation, like a Meow Wolf or something. And there's things happening in the physical location. Sometimes there's digital elements, oftentimes there are, sometimes it's more hardware build out, but those I consider immersive as well.
Yeah, and you just recently released a game, the Math Quest VR, that's
Yeah.
it's got that experience. Can you tell me a little bit about that one?
Yeah, that was a fun one. It started as a iPad app, actually, like a flat screen experience for my son when he was small. I was like, hey, I can make apps. I should make something that he can learn math, and it was a fun project for me. And then over the years, I just kept tweaking it. It was just like, he's grown up past the age where he likes those kind of games anymore. And so it was just kind of a fun hobby project I kept going over the years. And then at one point, I pulled it into VR, and I was like, oh, this is kind of neat. And so, yeah, it's been just a passion project for a number of years, and you get to shoot a paintball gun. Basically, you get a question, a mathematical question, and then the answer is somewhere in your environment. So you have to look around for the answer and then shoot the correct answer. And so it kind of uses multiple senses. You're thinking, and you're also looking and using aim, and yeah, so it's a fun game. And yeah, we released it on MetaQuest as well as Steam.
Cool. So, where do you see VR and AR going in the future? Those technologies seem like they kind of came onto the scene, but never really caught hold mainstream. In my opinion, from an outsider looking in, do you see them making a comeback? Do you see them still being strong, or maybe still being in a relatively early stage of their life cycle?
I can totally appreciate that perspective, and I think that's true. Like they haven't hit like, hey, everyone's doing this thing. The closest we got to that, I would say, was like Pokemon Go, or like for a while, just like everyone was playing Pokemon Go. But even that, like the AR element was sort of a side thing, and you could just turn it off. It wasn't like a core part of the experience. And so I think the challenge is like finding ways to make it not gimmicky. Like I think the challenges are different for the two. So for AR, it's like how do you avoid it being a gimmick? And we've evolved our applications that we build for our clients over the years. Like we do a lot of location, maybe historical is maybe the right word, where you're learning about a place. So you physically go somewhere and you're like, tell me the history or tell me about where I'm at. I want to learn things about this physical location. Of course, you could read like plaques or you could have a tour guide, but this kind of gives you a little bit more of a self tour. Initially, it was like really, really heavy ARs, like everything was popping up and there's a lot of that. And then we've pulled it back to where there's an AR like element, and then there's a lot of like traditional, a lot in the tech space, what you call like Web 2, like traditional scrollable website style material. Um, and that feels like a better experience. You're not just trying to make it flashy and then it's like, okay, that's not useful. So I think with AR, it's just better design. And knowing its limits, like not everything needs to be in 3D and not everything needs to be in your physical space. With VR, I think it's just a challenge of isolation and uncomfortable hardware. It's just like if I'm at home and I want to play a game with my partner Michelle, like I put a headset on, we're not playing a game together. I'm playing a game and then she's doing something else. And so it's finding a way to like make people be able to be more connected while they're in VR headsets would help. And then the second they just it's like the friction of booting it up, putting it on, waiting for it to calibrate, and then okay, I load into experience. Okay, half an hour in, it starts to feel heavy on my face. There's just a little bit, none of them are like super bad anymore, but there's so many little friction points that we have to get over. So I think as long as the money keeps getting spent, eventually we'll get there. I just don't know. We'll see if the investments run out before we solve the size and the isolation.
So transitioning now a little bit away from the technical side of stuff, let's look at more on the business side of things. So Devhouse supports external clients while some of your other organizations build internal IP. How do you balance the commercial work with the passion project?
I think if anyone were to come to me and want to do a similar business, I would say it's one of the harder things, honestly. The hardest thing is always, I shouldn't say always, but is sales. Sales are always hard. It's like that's what keeps a company in business, and you have to convince someone that they to give you money. Obviously, sales are hard, but beyond that, it's like how do you spend, even if you're not doing games, it's like how do you spend a little bit on R&D or like growth or innovation versus like where you're currently making money, because like the market can shift, and like if you're all in on one thing, that can be risky. For us, thankfully it kind of aligns. Like we're sort of diversifying, but also it's fun. Like we like that work, so it's a nice double value. The client work always comes first. It's just the nature of like if we had a big pile of money from some investor who just was so excited to run a game studio or invest in a game studio, maybe we wouldn't we wouldn't necessarily say that that's always the case. But since we're running the studio off of the money that we make from our client work, we have to put that as a priority. So all of our clients always get that. The way we separate is we try to have dedicated people on the staff for that project, and so we try to close projects that are large enough that we can afford to have 2 to 3 people on these like R&D projects. I spend a lot of my personal time on those R&D projects as well, and that's another way we can make it happen. And then when an emergency or an urgent need from a client comes up, sometimes we have to pull onto that to support. Over the years, we tried to do split time and like, hey, on this day we work on internal as a whole studio, and the other days we work on client stuff. But it became really hard to switch from project to project and have momentum. So we went back to the dedicated people as opposed to everybody shifting their time.
Do you rotate who works on which part, whether it's client work or your internal projects, or is it more based on what do we have, what are your skills, and what are we working on?
It's a mix of the two. When we can rotate, we like to give people that option of like, hey, this person probably would like to work on something fresh or something new. But sometimes there's projects that come in that like we have someone that's like an expert in that and like we really need them to be available for that project. Thankfully, a lot of our team is like pretty diversified. So we most of the time it's more on, hey, you've been on client work for a long time. How about the next thing you work on will shift you off of that? Or most often it's a specific project. Like, hey, you've been with this one client project for almost a year. To mix up your workday, let's put you on something else. Let's onboard someone else to take over for you, just to keep people fresh and excited. So we try to rotate people out.
Yeah, and that's really important in any kind of creative field, right? It is not feeling like you're stuck in the same project, and a lot of creative people, and that includes a lot of developers, even if they're not in a necessarily creative development role, that having different projects and different aspects of projects to work on to break up the monotony, so to speak, is definitely important. But it also is a way to learn new skills and expand their capabilities as well.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a win-win. The hardest part is just that time to onboard someone else. Ideally, you wait till the project ends, but sometimes it can be a really long project, and you have to invest that time to like bring someone else in. But I think it's a worthwhile endeavor.
So team culture is obviously important to you. That's something that you've mentioned. What are your hiring philosophies and what has helped you grow sustainably with a creative organization like this?
Yeah, culture is super important. So we try not to hire seasonal or project-based employees. That's not always 100% of the time the case, but most of the time that's what we try to do. And we try to bring people on to be a part of our team because I kind of believe in that like investment of a person, not only just like you grow them as a company as by like helping support them, but I think you learn to work with people and you learn what their strengths are and their weaknesses are, and like therefore you just work better and more efficient the longer you work with somebody. So as a general philosophy, like we try to keep a core team, and not really do these like wild scales of like, oh, let's go hire 50 people for this one project and then remove those 50 people. So that's part of it. The other part is I would say hiring on culture fit first and skill set second. And so because you can always teach skills if the person is a good learner and is easy to work with and is receptive to feedback and criticism. But if someone's an amazing, let's say we hire an amazing Unreal engineer and then suddenly we get a bunch of Unity projects in, but they're tough to work with and don't like learning something new, that person now becomes ineffective for what we need. So really like our first interview is purely culture fit. And then our second one starts again with more culture fit with more team members in before we even like really dive deep into any kind of technical capabilities or portfolio review.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's shift a little bit now back into the tech side of things. But I want to talk to you a little bit about where you see things going. Obviously, AI is making a big splash, and there's a lot of conversation about what it's going to do, particularly when it comes to development. I know gaming is a whole different beast than building a SaaS product or building some kind of a web app. Where do you think AI's role is in game development? And do you think it's going to make a bigger impact down the road? Or is it something where the creative side is too significant and AI really doesn't fit for game development?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say for sure down the road, but I think I start with today and then kind of talk about like maybe my guesses at the future. So I think today it's a useful tool, and I think everyone who's in the space shouldn't be afraid of it. And I think like anything brand new, initially there's a lot of repulsion, and then people start to be more accepting. And I think we're already in, I think, a little bit of an acceptance phase. There's still some attitude about it, and especially for artists, I think visual artists and writers are the ones that are feeling the most, I guess, attacked by this. But being familiar with the tools, right? So you know how to use it. We, as a studio, we've never like replaced somebody with AI. It helps like fill in better placeholders, basically. So like in the past, we might do a Google search and build a mood board out of like just image results on Google, right? A mood board by generative AI images. Now, that person doing that search on Google wasn't necessarily an artist. It might have been, but it might have been a project manager or someone that's just trying to get their ideas out. So then when they talk to the artist can work. So for visual artists, like it would be great if, yeah, you can also do that. Like, hey, here's what you described. This is kind of what you're thinking. It is cool. Now I'll take this as inspiration and I will make original art based off of that. And then for like on the engineering side, it's a great tool for basically supporting and improving your speed for like experimenting. I use it a ton for just like trying to find the fun in games. That's like a big misunderstanding. People thinks like you have a good game idea. That's you just have to build it. Most of the time ideas are like not when you actually build it, it's not that great. To put it simply, like you think it's going to be cool, and then you build it. You're like, oh, that's not how I thought it would play out. It turns out that cool idea is cool, but it's not actually fun. And so AI is really helpful for like quickly iterating on test ideas. But again, this is a good example of like how both are valuable. You then take that and you're like, okay, that worked, but man, I'm hitting like weird bugs every few minutes, and that keeps running into all these problems because the generative AI can build isolated things really well. It has a hard time combining a lot of systems because it's hard, not even at its own fault, but it's hard for you as a person to like really describe exactly what you need. And so honestly, it's a tool, but not going to replace in the near future. Now, in the far future, hard to say. I think it'll be like what it is today, but maybe a little further used. But I think it's still going to be people just kind of making more faster. But I don't think it'll be less people. I think it's still going to be like a lot of jobs and a lot of people working in the industry. We're just going to be able to make things a little quicker, and we're going to be able to make things a little bigger. Is kind of what I see. The counterpoint to like I guess devil's advocate to that is I do think we'll have to build stronger curation. So like people are gonna see a lot of like junk go out because like some people will just use it to spit out things as fast as they can that aren't very good.
Mhm.
A lot of like the vibe coding stuff, like just is not going to be very good. And so you're going to, especially in games, you're going to get a bunch of junk, and we need people to curate great experiences for us. So we're going to look more to streamers and to people who are going to say like, hey, this game is really great. You haven't heard about it because there's 1,000 other games that came out last week, but this one you should try. So yeah, that's a bit of my thoughts on that.
Yeah. Do you see AI being integrated? I think it's safe to say that it will be down the road, but not necessarily right now. Generative AI in particular being integrated into games to make more customized or personalized play experiences, or to have AI that can generate actual game assets within the game or manage NPCs, non-player characters, so that you have that much more custom game experience every time you play. Do you see that happen?
Yeah, I think that's one of the more potentially like interesting things that it's like hard or impossible to like have a live service game that's adaptive constantly for the customer, especially for like an individual customer, right? So I think that's an area where it's like it's not replacing somebody and assuming an algorithm can do it better. It's like, hey, this is a thing that like we can't physically hold the hand of a user all the way through this. So today there's nothing that I've seen that does it effectively to like make it feel like a good experience. But I do think that area will probably change. It still is questionable of like how much, let's say we're talking story. Like if you want a story that evolves with you as a player, how much of it's going to feel kind of soulless because you're like, hey, this is like it's reading my things, and or if it'll be cool, it'll be like, yeah, it's reading my actions and it's giving me a unique story. I think we'll have to wait and see how players react to it and if it feels interesting. But I think we'll definitely see it, and we'll see it done well, and then we'll have to see if people like it done well or if it's going to be like, yeah, this is weird, uncanny valley type of experience.
Yeah, yeah. As you're working with clients to build some of these things, are there questions from them coming in about, is there going to be AI involved in this, or are we going to build, what if we tried AI here or there? Is that something that clients are asking about?
Sometimes, yeah, yeah. I mean, not as much as you think, as loud as it is in like the investment space, where it's like super, super a hot topic and everyone's talking about AI and my LinkedIn is filled with AI, posts. It's not as common for clients to specifically ask for it. But we've had it before where, there was a project that we had to have images of homes. It was like a real estate. It was sort of like a simulate. It wasn't sort of. It was a simulated home buying experience, but it was think of it kind of gamified, and there's like timers and points and all that sort of thing. But we needed to, like, have these homes, but we didn't wanna, like, use real people's homes in the experience because that's a little weird. It's like, "Oh, that's my house. There's a photo of my house on this game." And so we used generative AI, and I think that idea came to us from the client, if I'm not mistaken, and that was a great use of it. It's like, I don't think we should hire hard an artist to go make 100,000 different unique suburban houses, that just wasn't it didn't make sense,
Right.
and the picture wasn't that important. It was like, this is just to represent a house, like
Yeah, yeah. With a with a project like that, is that usually something that the client comes to you fairly fleshed out with, or is a lot of the creative side of that project falling on your team? They have a basic idea, but you guys have to figure out the details and how it would work.
I'd say it's more often the basic details. It's more like the business needs. Like, hey, as a business, here's our requirements. Like, here's what our pain point is that we're trying to solve. And sometimes, like, here's how we think it could be solved. But really, it's more of a collaborative effort of like, here's what we're trying to do. In that case, it's like, hey, we want to build a web app that they can almost like they're using our real software to spend real money, but we're going to make a game version of it. And so they had that much. And then we just had to go through the real experience to kind of build a gamified version of that. And then sometimes it's very high level. It's like, hey, I want to make a game in this genre. I think this engine is cool, so I'd like you to use this engine. And I think this location for the game geographically is neat. And then from there, it's kind of a collaborative. We present ideas and they approve it or suggest alternatives.
Yeah, very interesting. So one last question from a business standpoint, what is your biggest bottleneck right now when it comes to business? Is it finding new clients? Is it finding good personnel? Is it something else entirely? The funding? What is the struggles right now?
I'd say for us, it's always been lead generation because I come from a creative background, and so I don't understand the sales space very well. But I'm also the salesperson of the company, and so it's always like borrowing time from my thing I love, which is the creative side, which is the building side, the product of what we build. I lead that, and then it's like, I guess I should go do some sales. And so the lack of having that like really passionate, dedicated salesperson results in that. So it's one of those things like you kind of know the cause of the problem, but then the challenge is kind of actually the challenge kind of spirals into like, oh, it's a personnel issue of like, okay, well, who could fill that role? And then that's where a limitation of like, because I didn't come from that world, it's hard to identify who a great salesperson would be. And what we do is custom software, and it's very unique, and it's really its own beast, and we don't have a playbook or a script. So yeah, it's like finding the right person to do sales leads is the hardest part. There's a lot of great game developers out there right now, so thankfully we're not on a shortage of people who make great games. And there's been times in the business where like production's been a challenge because there's too many projects that we happen to close that quarter. But those are my favorite kind of problems because I like the product problems around the product, so it never feels as painful as like a sales problem.
Right. No, that makes sense. Absolutely. Well, Jim, I really appreciate the time. This has been a really great conversation, great deep dive into game development, immersive tech, running a studio, all of that. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your perspective. For everyone listening, if you're building AR, VR, or game development and want to scale faster without losing your creative edge, I highly recommend checking out the Devhouse Agency. Jim, where can everyone find you?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So like if you just look up Jim Welch on LinkedIn, you can find me. That's where you can reach me personally most easiest. And then if you want to talk to my studio and talk about a specific project, if not directly with me, then go into our website at thedevhouseagency.com.
Fantastic. And if you're running a dev shop or SaaS company and looking to land more clients and scale revenue faster, shoot me a DM with the word growth. Thanks again for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and as always, keep pitching, keep building, and keep scaling. Thanks for listening to this episode of Pitch, Build, Scale. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast provider so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.